So I wanted to do my experiment on images and their effect on the frequency of false memories being recognized when studying those images versus words. So the DRM paradigm experiment that we did in class was really what got the ball rolling for me in brainstorming how and what I wanted to do for this experiment. The idea of false memories really was just a curiosity to me, and so I wanted to shape an experiment surrounding this idea. And so this first article I found that was super important with my help in the experiment was this relationship between DRM and misinformation false memories. And this was an awesome article kind of just depicting the current knowledge around false memory recognition that we have today and just how to utilize that DRM paradigm, what that means, and just an all-around great article to really encompass the paradigm itself. The second article that I really used a lot was that when does memory monitoring succeed versus fail? And this was another awesome false memory recognition article, but really encompassing different encoding ideas, studying them and testing them. And so this was what got me brainstorming with those different picture and images ideas of studying the different word lists. And then again, just utilizing that DRM paradigm. So then the last article that was super important and really helpful to me within this experiment was the false memory with images. And this just kind of helped me brainstorm how I wanted to utilize images and what I wanted to do for imagery in the experiment. This article was a little bit different from what I was aiming at, but was just a good one to really go back to when encompassing images. This one was more about perceived and imagined, and so different participants were instructed in different ways to either imagine a situation or they're given the situation and more in a picture format. And so in my study, I really just wanted to know more of that basic understanding if they would see the image and recognize it as old or new when compared to words and when compared to pictures. And so I just wanted to see if that helped a person decrease the frequency of the amount of times they falsely recognized a memory or old stimulus. So my hypothesis is that images introduced during study and testing phases will decrease the frequency of false memories. And so the word group will have more false memories recognized, meaning that they will say that more items that are new are actually old when in reality they are new and they weren't seen before. So they will falsely recognize these as have been studied when they really weren't. And then again, that picture group, the less false memories will be recognized because they will have that picture portion that helps encode differently and therefore will correctly identify when an item is old versus new. And so that null hypothesis will be images will have no effect of the frequency of false memories. So my independent variables were the list type, and those were going to be word versus pictures. And the dependent variables are the recognition and false memory frequency. And so this is the frequency of recognizing those presented items that were presented and you did see, so that would be old. The critical lures that were not presented but were highly related, therefore kind of described by the other words, weakly related items, and unrelated items. And I'll get a little bit more into those a little bit later. And so the procedure that I did was that the initial lists were studied, so these would be the presented items. The participants got a slideshow that they utilized to present all of the words to them. Each group studied 3 lists of 20 words or a picture word combination slideshow. And then between each list, there was time given to participants to take a break and remember the words that were previously presented, but really just trying to take a break between the lists and not create that exhaustion among participants. And then there was a break portion between the recognition tests where participants were given 4 riddles to solve and 10 seconds, so resulting in 40 seconds of them all before having to return to the test almost a minute later. And then for the recognition test to understand if things were critically, weakly related, or unrelated, and the participants were instructed to answer yes or no if they remember studying the word or the picture word combination. And there were 40 recognition words that were used for pictures that were presented. And so this was an example of one of the word slides. As you can see, all they received was just the word itself, just on the blank page. And then this was an example picture word slide where they saw the picture, but they also saw the word. And so these two, whether it was the word slide or the picture slide, this is how it would be presented again in the recognition test if it was in fact presented in the recognition test. Otherwise, there were new words that were given to the participants that were actually new information. And so the list presented during the study would be something along the lines of cooking, table, spatula, eating, dishes, produce, etc. And again, in a 20-word list, all surrounding maybe a basic theme. So that presented word would have been cooking. That critical word would be food. Weakly related would be something like kitchen, something that you do a lot of that in, and then unrelated would have been zebra. And so the presented word is what should have been recognized, and that is old. The critical words, so food, kitchen, and zebra, were all not presented and therefore would be a false memory if recognized. So we found that on average in the word condition, 6.75 words that were presented were recognized as opposed to 8.8 or 8.08 words that were recognized within the picture condition. The critical, you can see that there was a much higher recognition of those falsely recognized words in the word condition at 5.67 than the critical lures that were in the picture condition at 3.5, and so on and so forth. You can see that the weakly related was also more falsely recognized and unrelated was more falsely recognized in the word condition versus the picture condition. And both of these were considered significant with the p-value being less than 0.5 and also demonstrating along with the prediction of the hypothesis. So in figure 1, this is items recognized as old while studying and testing in the word condition. And so as you can see, the critical lure and the presented items are very close in amount that they were recognized. And then in figure 2, the items recognized in the picture condition, you can see that the critical lures, weakly related and unrelated, have decreased significantly, also indicating that it is along the lines of what we predicted within our hypothesis. And so again, the hypothesis was that images were introduced during study and testing phases will decrease the frequency of false memories. And the results that were significant depicted that this hypothesis was not rejected, and therefore that word and picture, it did have a significant impact on the critical lures that were falsely recognized and the ones that were not falsely recognized. But some of these limitations that we can see within this study is obviously the sample size, and so the ability to generalize this to a bigger group of people would not necessarily be appropriate due to the small amount of people that we were able to experiment on. And then again, the testing conditions, testing environment, and individual differences, obviously during the constraints of emailing these different presentations and experiments and slideshows, were harder to really decrease the amount of variations that were in those environments and those problematic situations. And so that was just something that had to be taken into consideration. Another one would be the idea that a lot of the individuals that are in our class, if they took the experiment, they do have a knowledge of the task. And so that can maybe influence the idea surrounding the false recognition of words, or the idea that they know you're describing a specific theme and therefore to not remember that word could have been a confounding variable. And then again, another instance of a real world application is hard to depict from this experiment using the DRM paradigm. However, in various situations, you might be able to utilize this with more of a studying technique, a better way to have people memorize things, less wording, more pictures, and just how false memories can be decreased when utilizing a better encoding process. And then, so future directions would be to maybe incorporate this into an everyday situation and to better incorporate this into maybe an eyewitness testimony, and along the lines of the individuals that are in these situations every day. Incorporating other senses, maybe not imagery, but sound, smell, different senses could be an awesome additional kind of snowball from this experiment. And then an additional group that could be really interesting as well to put within this experiment is imagine pictures, maybe telling people to really imagine a scenario and give different scenarios, and then ask if these scenarios were introduced or studied previously. And then also the role of emotions, and maybe how current emotions or current depictions of situations, varying different emotional states, would be a very interesting future direction to maybe experiment and incorporate into another presentation. These were the references that I used within my articles or within my experiment that I had previously. And so that is it for my presentation. Thanks for listening.